All right. Good morning, everyone. It's 8:30. You may notice we have a different setup than we have in the past. The reason for that, I know. The reason for that, over the last couple of years, we've had a few of the reporters who watch remotely ask if we can have a setup where they can see the governor's face, because when he is turned out this way, they can just see the back of his head and it's a little distracting from his message. We couldn't secure one of the rooms where that's possible, so this is the next best option. We appreciate you being flexible and understanding with that. For any of the reporters who are watching remotely right now, if you have any questions, like in past years, you can text them or email them to me and I will try to ask them on your behalf. For people who are here in the room, if you have questions, once again, because of Idaho in session, if you could turn on your mic, the governor will recognize you, and that way the camera can find you and show you on the stream, and also everybody can hear what your question is. Like in past years, the governor doesn't want to scoop his own state of the state, and so he might not answer all of your questions fully, so don't be surprised if you get a wait and see as an answer. And with that, Governor Brad Little.
Well, Melissa, now that they can see my face, don't worry, next year we'll go back to the other way of doing it, so... But thanks, everybody. It's always good to get started, and it's kind of an abbreviated month with Christmas in the middle of last week and New Year's in the middle of this week. The ramp-up time for the state of the state, and I know my legislative partners are hustling around trying to get things done. But to Melissa's point, I will not scoop my state of the state, except there is an election integrity surprise that you're going to hear about on Monday. I just want to make sure people show up. But, you know, our theme, we always have a theme, and this one is going to be talking about keeping promises. I will bore you a little bit with some of the things that you all know that has been going on, but they're still worth repeating about where we are here in Idaho. And then the other thing I'll probably talk about quite a bit is the changes in administration. I've been, we didn't know until the first week of November, and there's a lot of changes. It's no surprise to people in this room that the federal government has a lot to do with the state of Idaho. And, you know, some of them are budgetary, and I'll probably get a question on Medicaid, and some of them relate to that. A lot of them relate to fire and natural resources and the other areas. So we're myself and leadership in Idaho and the other governors are all basically trying to get their ducks in a row for January 20th. There's a lot of appointments taking place at this point in time. But, you know, here in Idaho, we've got the fastest growing personal incomes in the nation. We continue to offer tax relief. I know that as we already have, we're going to get, as I'd been doing 4 years ago, we'll have a lot of contact with the administration about what we've done on the regulatory front. And they've already reached out about what we've done in that area. And then, of course, there's all the investments we make, whether it's education, whether it's roads, whether it's resources, whether it's water. There's a lot of that. I briefed legislative leadership, minorities coming in this afternoon, not that you're not leadership, about, you know, kind of where we are roughly from a budget standpoint. We'll release that Monday about where we are. But we're in good shape here in Idaho. As you probably know, we've adjusted our budget numbers. We had such a great run, but you know, the federal money is all gone or all but gone, and the money that was stuffed into the economy has kind of run through the system, but we're still in really good shape. But a lot of that is a result of the growth and all the investments that are being made. We will be doing some, with this new administration, quite a bit of work in the public lands areas, obviously fire, As you're probably aware of, we went through most of our fire budget this year. It's about $60 million on a year with no fires. It takes about $15 million just to pay the fixed costs. This year we spent almost 60, and we won't know that for a while because the federal government, the reimbursement, but that'll be something. My top priority always is and always will be education. Since I got this job, all total, we've increased that by about 80%, whether it's teacher pay, whether it's literacy, whether it's discretionary funding, whether it's facilities. And of course, the big one from a year and a half ago was launch. And I'll talk about that, which shouldn't surprise anybody in this room. We will work with the legislature on what we're doing on the tax side. We have given $4.6 billion in tax relief since I got this job. And every time we do that, we get, a matter of fact, I got an email this morning just a minute ago. I read before I came down here about, what happens there. But we are so well situated. And one of the things that's very important to me is something we started where we do 5-year budget. And we know that because if we pass a bill this year that doesn't have a fiscal impact in FY25, it might have one in 26, 27, 28. We plug that all in there with the goal of keeping about a $200 million surplus every year. So we've got that shock absorber. We were worried just a few months ago that we were going to dip into that, but it looks like we're going to kind of be okay now. We'll continue to do infrastructure. Roads are a big part of what we've done. I think I joked a couple times that I read where Idaho has the best roads of any state, and as I drive around the state, I go, man, they got to be bad in these other states, because I driving from here to Emmett on State Street, there's a lot of asphalt that needs a major repair job there, and it's that way all over the state. But we're going to continue, whether it's our state highways or whether it's what we do with the locals, the cities and counties, for both roads and bridges. But we are now in our last tranche of bridge money, because even though it's by law, it's a responsibility of cities and counties and highway districts. Because we were being fortunate enough, we're fixing those bridges, but that money's all gone now. But of course, there's people saying, oh, we forgot to put our bridge in. I go, well, the door's kind of closed, but we'll continue to help them in the local bridge area. But back to launch a little bit. We are really an outlier. When I visit with my other governors, we are really an outlier about our go-on rate. We have what's taken place in Idaho, and Kevin's written about this, is really startling, whether it's particularly our community colleges, because that flow going into career technical training has really sparked a lot of activity. When I talk to school teachers, there were a way too large a percent of high schoolers that didn't think they were going to have an opportunity to go on because of the accessibility and the affordability of higher education. Launch has changed that. It's actually changing the attitudes of those kids that I need to work harder in high school so I'm prepared to do the traditional college route. Those kids were always kind of all right, but it's the ones that weren't, that know that they're going to have to work on their language arts and work on their math skills if they want to have one of these technical jobs. That is going to be one of the big dividends of what we've done in the workforce development field. That's going to, I think it's going to pay off for a long, long time. It's going to pay off in the availability of a workforce for a modernizing state. It's going to help all our industries. It's obviously going to help us in the housing area, because one of the critical components are plumbers, electricians, contractors. those are going to be helped enormously as we try to address that going forward. And kind of finally, public safety. We had our fourth state police visit to the border come back. I'm going to talk a little bit about that during the State of the State about what we're doing in the interdiction in that particular area, and it is critically important. We know that our crime numbers, statistics are not where we want them, but they're we're rated as a top 10 state for public safety. Violent crimes are down. But that is very important. And of course, that's where a lot of the migration into Idaho is a result of that. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about somebody that moved up here from another state. I won't say what state it is, but that was their critical issue to come to Idaho, and that continues to drive a lot of what's taken place here. The big job that the legislature does every year that they're constitutionally mandated is to set the budget. And we've got a new budget director, Lori Wolf. She's doing a good job. We met with Wendy yesterday. We've got a budget outline going forward, and we're excited for that. So, okay, it's time to stump the chump. Speaking of chumps.
Yes, good gentlemen. I wanted to... You asked about tax relief, and so I wanted to ask about the Luma IT system and the rollout over the last year and a half with that. As you know, Luma was unable to catch about $12.7 million that should have been in the surplus eliminator this most recent fiscal year, and that money isn't going out to taxpayers for another year yet. I wanted to ask your assessment of the Luma rollout and whether it's meeting your level of expectation, Governor.
Kind of. How's that? My definitive, solid answer. I have talked, I have the good fortune to talk a lot of leaders of big organizations, obviously institutions, but particularly businesses. Every time you make a wholesale change, there's going to be friction. And you absolutely know that there's going to be glitches, there's going to be timing issues, but I will caution everybody, you can't go back. That system's gone. The old system's gone. Governor Burgum, who made his living in the very, very successful living tech industry, early on, about 3 years ago, we had a Department of Labor, our state Department of Labor, particularly North Dakota, Idaho, and I had a good conversation with him, and he says, these things always have failure points. The people who are most successful just minimize the failure points. We know where the money is. I don't think there's any money that's been lost. There were a couple temporary issues in it. We anticipated part of that. Magnitude might have been a little higher. I do know that one of the issues, when I hear a specific issue, I try and dive into it. And some of it is the fact that people didn't go through all the training they needed to go through to be prepared for it. So on a scale of 1 to 10 about being a big problem in Idaho, I'll say it's a 2.5 or a 3.
Thanks.
That's the kind of answer. Am I done?
No.
Oh, okay.
I have a question from Heather Ann Wagner from KMBT in Twin Falls. With so many new lawmakers, how do you think this session will go with the launch pitch and your other education priorities?
I think it'll be fine. I mean, as I go around the state of Idaho, I remember last June, into May, June at the Memorial Day event, and Teresa and I were just there watching, and and these kids came up to me, from a private parochial school, and all 4 of them 3 years ago had no thought of going on, and they were all going to go on. And if legislators that are concerned about it go out and as I said, talk to those classroom teachers about the change in attitude about what's there, we know we're going to have some issues with it. It's a brand new program, but I tell you, the Workforce Development Council is doing a really good job. We're going to continue to prioritize it. What I like about it the best is it's demand driven. It's driven by basically the job providers that they say, this is what we need critical. The number one need in Idaho, and I don't think that's going to change, is going to be health care for a long time. And the fact that the number of kids that signed up for health care jobs was, and they self-selected, even though the nice thing about healthcare jobs, there's jobs in every single community, but we're going to have to build some capacity there. So I think we need to have a robust discussion about what's going on with launch, but I'm very, my confidence is pretty high because it's pretty hard to beat success. And the fiscal, I mean, when you take somebody that was going to get out of high school and have a starting wage job, there's hardly any or zero minimum wage jobs in Idaho, starting wage job, but you give them that training and all of a sudden they're getting $10 an hour more. You just think about the flywheel effect of that going into the economy. It's a big deal. So.
Hi, Governor.
Hi.
Thanks for chatting with us. Is your office bringing forward a private school choice bill this session?
We are, and as we always are, we're always in robust discussion with the legislature. It's a little slow in an election year because you don't know who legislative leadership, you don't know who the appropriators are, you don't know who the education committee is. So literally in the last month and a half, we've been having lots of discussions. We will be engaged as we always are, and that's, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the sideboards that I have, which should be no surprise to people in this room. The sideboards I've had in the past, the sideboards I'm going to have in the future.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Yep.
And if a bill comes to your desk this session, what sorts of things are you weighing in the particulars in a bill?
You know, I suggest Monday that you tune in and you'll have a better idea.
Hi, Governor. I wanted to ask you about the ITD building report. Obviously, that came in higher than what was budgeted last year to repair the building. From your perspective, what are you hoping to see as a solution to this issue?
Well, it's in the legislature's hands now because it was, you know, we had basically a roadmap going ahead when the flood happened. Particularly in conjunction with what we're doing at the Chittenden campus. So that was going forward, and for one reason or another, they decided to divert from that. I stated it numerous times last year. I was more concerned about, I was very concerned about reputational risk, and I voiced that. But now, you know, and if we know something's going to happen, we are not as diligent about basically giving a kind of a rough estimate of what it's going to cost. If we don't think it's going to happen, then we say, well, here's what some numbers are given certain scenarios. Well, now we've got a different scenario to where they need more, a better answer and a better estimate, a concrete estimate about what's going to go happen. So we'll be delighted to work with the legislature on what's taking place there. So,
Governor, You said we are so well situated financially. Can you tell us how that might influence your willingness to support cutbacks in state spending on things like Medicaid expansion?
Well, I will tell you, you got to, as I stated earlier, we do a 5-year budget, and if you have a temporary change in a qualification, that the net of it is an increase elsewhere, you got to, that's the beauty of doing what you do in your households and what every business does is do more planning for just 1 year. And if the unintended consequence of some radical change is we have, all of a sudden we got property tax issues at the county where we put back, that is going to be a hard thing to unwind. On the other hand, we have a stack of waivers that are sitting back at CMS that we had sitting there over 4 years ago, that now I think there's going to be changes. And I really am hopeful that, we can have a dialogue with the legislators about some of the things we can do there to make the program more efficient. So, what may look like a temporary savings may not be a temporary savings if we have to go back to it being on your county taxes. If we have, we insure, the state insures all the educators and all the state employees. Private insurance is going to, if we don't have that safety net, and of course the whole issue of Medicaid expansion to me, and I wasn't, but what I was a proponent for is the gap between traditional Medicaid and the people who are getting the tax benefit, those people in between, it was patently unfair. And we could have addressed that through a waiver before the people of Idaho, given their constitutional right, amended the state law.
Hey, Governor. So the ACLU filed an emergency motion with the Idaho Supreme Court on Christmas Eve outlining these alleged failures of the State Public Defender's Office to do the bare minimum of representing indigent defendants in hundreds or thousands of cases. What is your office doing to ensure that these defendants are getting that kind of constitutional coverage? Well,
you'll have a better idea Monday, but we're very cognizant of the litigation and what's taken place. It was a big policy move, but it was in response to a lawsuit. But, when you stand back and look at it, it does make sense that, if you're in Bonneville County versus Clark County, what kind of constitutional protection have you got? Now, the question is, are you going to pay Boise and Sun Valley wages to lawyers in Du Bois and Kellogg, which is going to be part of the issue. But we had an estimate of what it was going to cost. It's going to cost more. The new State Public Defender Office apportioned out what they thought was fair, and which was the understanding with both the executive branch and the legislative branch when that was put together. There's obviously some things change. We want to comply with the Constitution, but it is going to be an issue that we're going to have discussions on, and I've actually been talking to the legislative leadership about it, and we'll bring in the judiciary committees right away to have that discussion.
Just a quick follow-up on that. I know you said we'd learn more Monday, but is there any sort of reserve money funding that you can throw at the office to potentially get more contract attorneys, at least before you hire on someone full-time to fill those positions?
Yes.
Governor, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about DEI. You supported the resolution that the State Board passed last month, but we had hundreds of students during finals week comment about this resolution, and most of them are opposed, and many of them feel like this is going to leave them marginalized or compromise the student supports that they now receive. What do you say to that?
When you make a change in a program where somebody's getting a benefit, it is not a surprise to me that people were concerned about it. We need to alleviate their concerns, that we're sensitive, that we basically respect all students. We want all students to be successful, and I think that's, the timing of it, regardless of what time they did it. There was probably going to be some people that objected to it. I know there was that furor initially, but I think it's subsided a little bit. But we want to be sensitive but we really do want to help everyone be successful as a student, particularly if they have a challenged background.
If you'll yield to a follow-up question.
Do I get a chance to refuse? I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. We'll see if you yield or not. You do have a legislative task force looking at this issue. They're going to meet again next week. Do you feel that there's a need for legislation on this front, or do you feel like the state board resolution satisfied your concerns?
Well, generally, I have confidence in the state board. Obviously, the state board will have dialogue with the legislature, because they operate under the laws the legislature does, and the legislature's got to do what they need to do, and the state board needs to do what they need to do. But I do think the state board is thinking about the best interests of Idaho and Idaho students.
Hi, Governor. I also wanted to ask about Medicaid expansion. I hear there's two types of bills expected in the next session: bills that outright repeal expansion and bills that require some type of reform, like sideboards as a condition for expansion to continue. So would you sign a bill outright repealing expansion? And if not, what kind of sideboards are you looking for?
Well, I guarantee you that will be a complicated bill, and I can't make any kind of a commitment without seeing the bill. But I want to go back to what I talked about earlier. There's really a new Medicaid's a federal partnership program, and it's all driven by the federal government. We've got a whole new administration back there, so I would urge, and we're delighted to work with the legislature about, what's your goal and what can we do with CMS on the federal side to get that done. The former CMS director, Seema Verman, and I had a really good relationship, and we had a lot of things in the queue that just didn't get done. We want to make sure that Medicaid's efficient, and we don't just shift the cost of health care to somebody else by making a radical change.
Hi, Governor. I know I'm not a familiar face, so I'm Rachel Spacek. I work for Investigate West. I wanted to ask about your statement last month in support of Trump's immigration policies, and I wonder how you reason supporting those policies and putting state resources behind those while our dairy industries are concerned about labor and they heavily rely on undocumented labor. So I'm wondering if you could respond to those concerns.
Well, obviously I'm supportive of particularly what there's a few mixed signals, and there's some of the nominees that have got to go through the process, and then even after they go through the process. But we've already seen, and I'm in agreement, because the H-1B program, the H-2A program, which is what agriculture wants to do, and the dairy issue would be solved real easy by just having them qualify for the H-2A program, where a lot of, matter of fact, there are a lot of operators in Idaho that have got H-2A operators, a legal program sitting right next to them. So I'm obviously the dangerous criminal. What we do there, we're all supportive of. I was one of 23 governors that submitted to the current administration 10 things they could do to basically ebb the flow, the flood of illegal immigration. Over time, the current administration implemented 2 or 3 of them and made a big change. I assume that almost all 10 of those recommendations are going to go into place, and so that alone is going to send a message. But we need to, everybody that talks about immigration said we got to secure the border, we got to make sure our legal immigration is working. But I think actually the message to nefarious people is don't come here, and if you do come here, you're going to be prosecuted, and we're probably going to send you back. So at some point in time. So I think that's but we will see.
As a follow-up to that question, we, as a country have been talking about H-2A reforms for decades now, including with several Republican administrations and with Republican congressional majorities. Why is this the time for that, do you think?
Nixon went to China, for anybody old enough to remember. I mean, I think Trump's position on immigration is going to give him more runway to do some significant things.
Yesterday, the Chief Justice talked about how the courts are going to be asking for some pretty significant changes. Is that something your office is looking at, and are you supportive of some of the proposals they're making in terms of?
Well, I haven't seen the package yet, Laura, but I supported the compensation change last year, and I assume I haven't seen the details of it because I just saw the report on it. But and I know the judiciary always sends a package of bills over, and I'll confess if it's in my office, I haven't read it yet. So we'll look at that. But I do know that they're interested. My job is to screen, or after the Judicial Council, to basically interview candidates. There's some areas of the state where compensation is enough of a barrier to where our slate of candidates is not as robust as it was some time ago.
I just wanted to ask pretty quickly, would you support any reforms to Idaho's medical legal death investigation processes or support resources from the state to help coroners do their jobs?
I think if you look back when I was a senator, I think the training for coroners, I think I carried that legislation for the Coroners Association. That is, coroners are embedded into our Constitution. They're the only individuals of 44 coroners, the only people in the state that can arrest the sheriff. There's certain things in there. Obviously, we've got some counties where they've got the resources and everything they need, and it's another issue where some of these you don't have that. We've had some pretty nasty horror stories over my tenure in politics about where coroners and of course the ones you remember, the ones where it was not a good story. So I think we need to make resources available to them. But every time it's almost a third rail touch a mandatory training for a county constitutional officer, you'll get some pushback.
So you would support more state resources?
Yes. And that bill, I think increased, don't hold me to that, but I know somebody in this room will. I think we increased the death certificate fee, and that's the money that went into the training. And that was legislation that I sponsored.
One more question. Great.
Now you feel sorry for those legislators that forget to turn on their microphones.
Thanks again for taking the time this morning. As we're getting ready for Micron to open up their new fab, there's been concerns about how that could impact even more housing affordability issues here in the Treasure Valley. Is, any more state resources for affordable housing or workforce housing. Is that something that is even possible for your office to support, or is that something that you want the private market to handle?
D, all of the above.
Okay.
But of course, the real push is right now, because there's 10,000 construction jobs. There's only about 1,700 jobs when the plant gets open. So the real push is coming right today, on the construction side. So, and for the Boise Valley to absorb 1,700 jobs is really not a big challenge. They're going to be very, very skilled jobs. The 1,700 people that are 1,700 to 2,000. But right now, what we need are basically launch careers, plumbers, electricians. Those are what. And I know there have been some temporary proposals. We had a housing initiative that we proposed and the legislature adopted. Most of that money, all of that money's gone, but some of it's starting to recycle through. So, the Idaho Housing and Finance, and then local communities also step up, as does private enterprise. So we'd like to do these things in a partnership as much as we can.
Yeah, thanks, Governor. I haven't talked much about taxes today, and I wanted to ask about the grocery tax.
They're too high.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Wanted to ask about the grocery tax, the sales tax on food. I feel like we ask about it every year. But I wanted to ask whether the rebate that we have in place covers it for Idahoans. But we continue to hear, especially with inflation and everything else, about the difficult time of affording day-to-day goods. Is the sales tax on food, is it something we've taken care of with the rebate? Do we need more work on the rebate? Or are you open to repealing the grocery tax itself?
Yes, yes, and yes.
And how would you do that?
One of the above options.
But to humor me, for Idahoans who are continuing to struggle with the cost of their day-to-day purchases and are looking to the chief executive and the legislative branch for some guidance, what would you say to folks who are struggling to make ends meet, who are not even able to live paycheck to paycheck, and they look at their grocery bill adding up?
Well, I've stated before that, a certain repeal of the sales tax on groceries, if it got to my desk, within certain parameters. Of course, part of the issue is defining groceries. Most people, when they leave a Winco or an Albertsons, look at their bill and say, but you got to realize that there's a whole bunch of that may not be food. And then if it's all groceries, what about me when I buy a curling iron when I'm in there? That's a joke.
You get a lot of those, don't you?
That's always, and that's the issue in states that have it, is how do you define, alcohol, pet food, fill in the blank, sundries, makeup, shampoo. That's part of and that's where the rebate is easier. And as the rebate gets higher and higher, the fiscal note for repealing it changes significantly. And of course, it also depends upon how we categorize them and how many members you have in your family. So that's part of but I know we're going to have a discussion on it. I look forward to it.
Are you asking your legislative partners to push one way or the other, whether it's defining what food or groceries is, whether it's working on the rebate?
I actually think, Clark, your question is the most important one, is what's the net, and how does that affect the families of Idaho?
I have a question from Ruth Brown. DHW is asking for a significant number of new full-time positions for child welfare, and that's obviously been a huge priority for the new director. How much of that budget request might you be supporting?
Just in case you don't have anything going on Monday.
1 p.m. Mountain Time.
All right.
Got it. All right. And then a question from Heather.
But let me add a little color to that. Some of those positions, maybe one time. Director Adams is doing the yeoman's work on foster care, and some of those investments we make, as I looked at the budget, some of that may be one-time money to get over the hump and get programs in place. I think I was just told yesterday that we've got all the foster kids are now, there's no foster cares in Airbnbs or we've got them all in facilities, and that's a goal, and that's going to be part of that.
Another question from Heather Ann Wagner at KMVT. Are you planning to include more funding or programs to protect the waterways from quagga mussels?
Well, we will obviously be relying on the State Department of Agriculture and the Office of Invasive Species and the Fish and Game about what we need to do. We did get a good influx of new funds last year to do more surveillance, because we would not be in the good position we were in if we had not been doing the surveillance that we did before. And really the need for surveillance goes up. But we spiked that ongoing budget last year.
Follow up on public defense.
Okay.
We talked about the reaction to the loss or the requests from the ACLU, but coming into this fall, coming into October when that new office was set up, did your office anticipate any of the challenges that that we have since seen?
Instinctively, old Brad from Emmett thought, you put a new program in it where you're basically alleviating pressure elsewhere, and people are going to, you put a new program in place, people are going to oversubscribe or they'll when they want it to happen, they'll underestimate the cost and then they'll oversubscribe. And that's just that is nothing about public defenders or anybody else, but that's just the nature of a big swing from having it locally funded to having it funded by somebody else, whether it's the federal government or whether it's state.
At the end of last session, your office had some concerns about the bill requiring Medicaid waivers. 398? Yes.
I wrote a little letter about that.
Yes, I know it was something your office said you'd be kind of monitoring, and the health department decided to go forward with the behavioral health plan change. Were there any issues or were there disruptions? I'm just wondering kind of where that.
Well, I talked about it a little bit earlier, and my concern about the language was that I had to call the legislature. Our interpretation was I had to call the legislature back in session if I want to make any kind of a tweak in how we handle Medicaid. Well, the authors of that legislation were concerned about the administration we have today. They're probably just the opposite about the administration we have going forward. So I think we need to look at some of the language in there, make sure it allows, and the legislature needs to be comfortable with it. Because Medicaid has consumed so much of our revenue. I'm all in with the legislature being comfortable with what's taking place. But I think with the new administration, changing how we do Medicaid is going to be mutually beneficial to the people of Idaho, to the state of Idaho, and to the federal government. We want to have the right incentives. We want people to be covered. We want them to have health care. We want to have every incentive possible for them to move from Medicaid onto private insurance, onto some other program, and anything that restricts our ability to provide that service to the state is probably counter to good governance.
Quick follow-up. Did you receive guidance on, I know there were differing interpretations. Did you get guidance from the Attorney General on that?
Well, we're getting by. Let's put it that way. We're getting by. But my concerns, I think there were 4 points in that transmittal letter. My concerns, some of them are still relevant today.
Governor, I want to go back to what you were talking about with launch and how a lot of the launch students are self-selecting into health professions. I want to ask more broadly about the state of health education in Idaho. We're seeing some collaboration and some partnerships, but you're also seeing an undercurrent of competition between the universities. You've got Idaho State University looking at the feasibility of acquiring ICOM. What is the fine line for you between moving quickly to address a need and moving too quickly to the point where you could have duplication and wasted money?
We do that in higher ed, as you well know, all the time. We're the state of Idaho. This goes back to 1984 when I was involved in a higher ed task force. Having four-year institutions in a state as small as Idaho is unique, but there's a reason that all four of those institutions are there. And so it's, and when I interview and select candidates for the state board, one of the criteria is, how do we efficiently deliver high quality education without having duplication and having it be efficient? And that's the same thing with healthcare. But obviously, demand for healthcare is skyrocketing. It's the number one priority for the state board, and we need to expand healthcare capacity in Idaho. How we do it and what we do it. Obviously, the state board, the institutions, and the legislature will all have a say in it. But I want it to be as efficient as possible. But you're right. Duplication is a little bit of a problem, but if they sit down collaboratively and work together, one of the issues is for a lot of these healthcare jobs, they've got to have available hospital capacity. That was one of the issues that we've actually solved at ISU is the Portneuf Medical School. There was not enough floor space and bed space to educate all the, if you're going to say all the healthcare is going to be located in Pocatello, we just don't have enough clinical space for them to work. That's why ISU prudently opened the facility in Meridian to where they can spread those things around. That's part of the issue with healthcare. You've got to have jobs that are there to where those students can get out and get that hands-on experience they need before they go into practice.
And quickly, does Idaho need its own public medical school? And what's your thought about ISU looking at the possibility of acquiring ICOM?
I've talked to the president, talked to me about it. I said, well, let's look at it. Let's look at the pros and cons. What's it going to cost? How's it going to work?
Governor, one of your big headline issues in your previous State of the State address was the state of disrepair in Idaho school buildings. The legislature used that policy as an avenue to address some property tax relief throughout the state. Are you happy with how that program is going so far? And what sort of issues are different school districts seeing that you think the legislature needs to address?
Yeah, you may hear a little bit about that on Monday, but I think that there's, one of the issues is, that was a huge, $1.5 billion is a lot of money. And of course, as soon as you put one of these programs out there, then it's never enough. I think we need to make sure that it's fair, that some of the smaller districts, but we don't want to have it too fair because where it's so fair that there's no incentive for small districts to be efficient in how they deliver education. So that's a discussion the legislature will have. And, for the most part, everybody's pretty happy with it.
Governor, I'm not sure if you're aware that former Arizona Governor Doug Ducey is going to be here on Monday.
Yep.
I'm curious where you might land on a bill similar to Arizona's universal ESA program. Would you support a bill with universal eligibility? And if so, does the state have the money for something like that?
I don't know. What time's Doug talking?
Before you.
Well, might change after it.
Governor, is your office currently trying to secure more lethal injection drugs after the last round expired in November?
Well, as you know, that's exempt from the open meetings, which I'm sure you're trying to ply into.
I can still ask.
The Department of Corrections is doing their job.
Earlier you mentioned wildfire and partnerships with federal partners. I was just wondering if you could provide any details in terms of what you'll be looking at for management of forests. I know you've been fairly critical of how the federal government has been managing lands in Idaho, and I'm wondering if you're looking for something different with the new administration coming in and how that happens.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be one of our number one priorities. And in fact, you know, the Western governors, I was at the Western governors meeting a month ago, and that's one of the highest priorities. And it doesn't matter whether Republican governors or Democratic governors. We all agree that the way we've got to be more successful, we got to be more efficient. Obviously, we always got to keep our people, the residents safe, and also our firefighters safe. But there's a lot of things taking place in the firefighting area, and you know, we have those discussions, the land board, all the time about what we do for early detection, initial attack. What do we do? So there's a lot going on, and you know, and I keep reminding my federal partners that you know. And they have a different mandate in certain areas. Obviously, initial attack in the last week of September in the middle of the Central Idaho Wilderness area is different than initial attack right up here on the Boise Front. So it's you know, but we went through a process where we call it cost sharing, where we said, the state will handle this piece of real estate, the Forest Service will handle this piece of real estate, the BLM will handle this piece of real estate, the timber protective areas will handle this piece. We want to make that as efficient as possible. And one of the things that I've asked for is we need a dashboard of all the resources. Because if you have and this year got close, we didn't, but if you have a huge fire year, and of course we're blessed because a lot of the asset allocations taking place out here at the Boise Airport. But we want to be planned out ahead of time. But when I say planned out ahead of time, that's doing forest health projects 20 years before there's a fire. And you know, it's interesting that on our state lands, the cost of fire suppression is just a fraction of what it is on the federal estate, and but they have a different mandate. I don't deny that. But you know, what we're doing with shared stewardship, what we're doing, good neighbor authority, I think we can extend that into the fire area.
Hi. So last year, lawmakers didn't amend Idaho's abortion ban laws, despite doctors asking for a maternal health exception for more legal clarity. Last I checked, the Biden administration's EMTALA challenge was still active, but it was unclear if that was going to continue under the Trump administration. So do you think that after a couple years have passed, Idaho's abortion ban laws need some kind of amendment, like a maternal health exception or other modifications?
Well, the legislators that I was involved with during that legislation, for the most part, have said they're willing to look at it, but I do think we need to have these legal challenges cleared out to where we know what all the scenarios are. There are different interpretations about what takes place at what time, and so if we can get those, and some of that litigation will survive the change in administration. It might be handled differently by the DOJ, but that litigation will go forward. It would be very helpful if we had that all resolved, and then we could address some of these issues. I'm always concerned, you know, as a always pro-life person about basically the reproductive long-term health of the mother. And are we addressing that? And I think the Idaho legislature, most of them are interested in that also.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Sure.
Why do you think waiting for this litigation to resolve is the right answer? It's my understanding that these litigations are answering like sets of questions within this policy. Like EMTALA is just emergency medical care, not the broader abortion or maternal health.
Well, I think the emergency part of it might address part of that. And I think that's part of it. But if those legislators that have talked to me about it want to work on it. I think we need more definition about what's taken place to give more surety to the healthcare industry and to mothers about what the game plan is going forward. So.
Governor, last year you put in your budget funding for a secure mental health facility, and the legislature approved it, appropriated it. What's the status after a year?
I can't tell what the status is today. I know it's going forward. We've got some other issues that we got, and actually you're going to see in the budget Monday some other things we're doing at corrections for a variety of other challenges, but it's in the pipeline. I don't know but I will look, and Emily or Joan can get back to you about where we are on that process.
One more. Do you support daily Bible readings in public schools?
I think it's going to be a broad challenge given the language in the Idaho Constitution.
So,
of course, the issue is, and it depends upon what district you're in. The Bible has a lot of historical parts in it that people, but it's the mandated part of it. It's the litmus test part of it. But I always find great enlightenment when I read the Bible, and I think it's and I know it's different in different schools, but the mandated I think is going to be a lift given the language in our Constitution.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that's all we have time for. So Governor Little, thank you so much for joining us.
Next time, bacon.
We'll see you in February.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.